Belle Boomerang is an adorable little 8-bit platformer that looks like it could have been done on the Game Boy Color. It's the kind of game you look at and you get nostalgia for, even though you've never played it. And the little characters and enemies are so cute. It was just such an adorable game and an instant buy when I found it on the Steam store. And I figured it would be a nice simple platformer that I could just kind of breeze through and enjoy my time with, but my god was I wrong. This may look like a cutesy little kids game, but it is actually brutally difficult. It all starts out easy enough. You have your little world map, you pick your stage, and it tells you how many scenes there are. I kind of like that, as it let you know how long the stage was, so you could kind of gauge your progress. This became really important as the game got harder and harder. Knowing that I was somewhat close to the end of the level gave me just a little bit of hope that I could beat it, and it prevented me from throwing my computer out the window. So the game starts out, and you're this little girl with a little boomerang on a quest to save the kingdom. The boomerang has always been a staple in video games, and some of my favorite weapons of all time are boomerangs, most notably the cross in Castlevania. But this has got to be the worst boomerang in video game history. It's tiny, has virtually no range, and doesn't even kill half the enemies. Some of them it does, but many enemies cannot be taken down with it. Luckily, each level there are some enemies that you can kill, and they will give you a special power unique to that level. This was a really cool feature that made exploring each level a lot of fun. The powers were mostly pretty cool and added some nice elements to the gameplay. It starts out pretty slow. The first level you get the ability to throw tomatoes, which is not super exciting, and then you get these bubbles. They're more powerful than your boomerang and can kill most enemies, but they're slow and don't add really any variety to the gameplay. But these powers really come to their own as the game progresses. Like you get this little snowball. It can be used to freeze enemies and make them susceptible to kill with you boomerang, but it could also be used to freeze water spouts and lakes to create bridges. You can even freeze droplets of falling water for some really tricky platforming segments. You get the ability to fly, but your wings are vulnerable to heat, much like the wings of Icarus, and if you stand by fire for too long, you'll lose the ability until you cool off in water. This creates some really tricky sections where you have to carefully manage your flight meter around candles and other little flames. I think my favorite power-up was the little spark. You touch these stations and then you could turn into a ball of electricity and stick to walls, which is necessary to get around high walls and speed past some tough obstacles. They use this in a lot of creative ways, and I really enjoyed speeding around the levels as a little bolt of electricity. All of the powers are fun to use and added some nice dynamics to the gameplay once you got past the early simpler sections, and the variety really kept the game interesting and gave you something to look forward to from level to level. And you're going to be spending a lot of time with these powers. For the most part, you're only going to have each one for one level, barring the final level where you get a variety of different powers, but you're going to be spending a lot of time with them anyway because you're going to be dying a ton. This is a really unforgiving game. You get 2 hearts, but even when you upgrade your maximum hearts, it doesn't matter. By the end of the game, I was able to hold a maximum of 4 hearts, but you always start with only 2 after you die, and enemies almost never drop life, so the extra health really does absolutely nothing. Checkpoints are sparse. I mentioned before that the game tells you how many scenes are in each level. Each scene is like its own little level, and you typically don't get a checkpoint every scene. On average, it's every other scene, but that can be pretty lengthy and challenging, and every so often the game cheaps out and doesn't give you a checkpoint till 3 or 4 scenes in, which just makes some nightmarish gauntlets. The checkpoints are not triggered automatically either. There are these little bells that you have to ring. I swear, on one of these levels, I must have walked past this bell 30 times before I noticed it was there, meaning I had to replay long sections a ton before I finally noticed it. But that's my fault, so I really can't blame the game for that. Just make sure you look out for them every time you enter a new area. The game really does a fantastic job of forcing you to learn how your new ability works and then use them in a million different ways. In some sense, there's a puzzle aspect to it. It's usually nothing you have to look at a walkthrough over, but you may have to stop and think on certain parts, especially the bosses. There are not many of them, but oh my god, these little creatures are brutal. They usually have between 3 and 6 hit points, but as I mentioned before, your completely useless boomerang can't just hit them whenever. You have to dodge their patterns and figure out when they're vulnerable, and then how to hit them, which is not always obvious. This boss here almost broke me. It was just so difficult. The attack patterns were so long, and I just felt like I was never going to beat him. When I finally did, you go through a door, so the level's not even over, and then you have to do some tricky platforming. You get to the top, and there's this boss shooting fireballs. battles, and honestly, it was a really easy pattern, but I had no idea how to damage him. I eventually saw this little string hanging from the top and knew I had to pull it to beat him, but I feel like it took me like 43 hours to figure this out. It was just exhausting dying over and over again, and I didn't want to turn off my game for fear that it wouldn't save my checkpoints, although in fairness to the game, it does save your checkpoints. I think exhausting is actually a good word to describe all of these boss battles. They are long and brutal. The nature of that means you can't just get good at them and then speedrun them. You have to be patient and pick your spots. But your spot is not always going to hit them, and if you miss your spot, they're only vulnerable for so long before they repeat, and you have to do the whole thing over again before you get a chance to hit them. Every single boss in this game was difficult. Even the first boss took me a while to beat, but luckily there are not that many of them, and you only fight one every 3 or 4 stages or so. Before I end the review, I want to take a minute to talk about the soundtrack. I typically don't notice music in games unless it is either really good or really bad, and the music in this game was just so grating, particularly on the 8th level here, where I just died so many times, and this godforsaken music eventually just prompted me to turn the sound off and listen to something else. I typically love some good old chiptune video game music, but it just did not hit the mark for me here. In fact, I think the soundtrack generally ranged from really bad to just mediocre. Garbage soundtrack aside, this is definitely a game I would recommend if you love old school platformers with some good variety and a brutal challenge. It does offer different difficulty options, and if you want to save your sanity and possibly your controller, I would pick the easiest one to start, which I did not do, but I did eventually make it through, and as painfully difficult as it was, I really did enjoy this experience.